So hey guys, it's Tamara. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for coming back. Today we're going to talk about traumatic brain injury. So this is going to be a little bit of a brief video, but it has been a request from a few of you. So I figured I would go ahead and utilize our bonus Wednesday to talk about traumatic brain injury. So thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For those who are subscribed and for those who are not subscribed, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you can stick around with us. The benefits for you in today's video is that you're going to learn about traumatic brain injuries. And then I also want to point out a condition known as foreign language syndrome. And I'm sure that's something that you have never heard of before. So let's just go ahead and jump in, all right? So what is a traumatic brain injury? A traumatic brain injury is any kind of incident or event that has caused real, lasting or short-term damage to the brain. That could be multiple concussions where the brain actually hits up against the skull and bruises itself. It could be a stroke where there's low oxygen levels in the brain causing certain areas to die, causing an individual to lose an ability to speak or to move. So motor activity is decreased. We can also have things like multiple sclerosis, or Parkinson's disease. Any of those conditions can be considered traumatic brain injury depending on the severity of the trauma and the kind of damage that has resulted. Now, there's a particular traumatic brain injury that occurs in the prefrontal cortex, and that particular brain injury, which I'm going to post in the description box below for you, was an injury that affected a pretty popular guy in psychology, and he's popular because of the brain injury. His name is Phineas Gage, and he was a railroad worker, if I can say it. And he had an accident where a piece of the metal that he had been working on actually shot up into his eye socket through his skull. So he had this piece of iron. It was a thick piece of iron, and it went through his eye socket through to his skull. Well, it pierced an area of the brain known as the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is behind the head, behind the forehead, I should say, and the function of the prefrontal cortex is decision-making, impulse control, personality development, really important pieces of who we are. And so when that has been disrupted by an injury, you're going to get a change. Well, Phineas Gage survived that traumatic incident, surprisingly, but he didn't survive in terms of his personality. Once the surgery was completed, which often happens to a lot of other brain individuals with brain surgery, or who have had brain surgery, there was a major shift in his personality, So prior to the incident, he had been calm, he had been reflective, he had been peaceful and pleasant. After the brain injury and after the surgery, he had become very vulgar in his language. He was aggressive. He was very impulsive. He wasn't able to make decisions. And some parts of his speech were different as well. I often use this particular example to explain to families that come in to see me the changes that are likely to occur with an individual who has a traumatic brain injury. Now, there's a condition known as foreign accent syndrome. That is a condition that has stumped mental health providers as well as neurologists. Now, some individuals develop foreign accent syndrome after a traumatic brain injury or after a surgery, any kind of surgery on the parietal lobes, which is in the middle of the head or the skull, which has a lot to do with us understanding where we are in space and time. It also has a lot to do with our senses, right? We also have individuals who have had occipital lobe surgeries, which is behind the back of the head. It has a lot to do with sight. I've also had individuals come in who have had temporal lobe damage, which are right here on the sides of the forehead near the temples. That also has a lot to do with temperament and just kind of regulation of who we are and impulses and things like that. So those kind of brain injuries and brain surgery, if that occurs, can result in foreign accent syndrome. Now, a lot of individuals struggle with conceptualizing what that means. So let me explain it. What it means is that the ways in which an individual talks and pronounces things, or the ways in which they say their vowels, can really sound like a different accent. The individual can come up with a British accent, can come up with a French or a Spanish sounding accent. In a lot of cases, the trigger is brain surgery or traumatic brain injury. But there are some individuals who have the condition foreign accent syndrome, and there is absolutely no known cause. That is scary. That is so scary, and for a lot of people, very perplexing, even for those of us who study this kind of stuff, okay? So when you have foreign accent syndrome, you're gonna have what's called vow'd distortions, meaning that the way that you pronounce vowels is going to change. So instead of sounding American, you may start to sound British. Instead of sounding British, you may start to sound French. And clearly you are not from any of those countries. But the ways in which you pronounce vowels, the ways in which you communicate, it's going to be a change. There's also going to be a change in what's known as porosity. All right. There's also going to be voicing errors. So instead of saying things like bike, you may accidentally take the B out and put a P in there for pike. So it's really interesting what happens when the brain is affected, whether by surgery or injury. It's very, very likely that you're going to experience some changes. All right, so I'm going to put some of this information in the description box for you below. I'm going to follow this video up on Friday by answering your questions. I had someone ask me a question about dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder, as you're most likely more familiar with. And the question was, why do these individuals speak in different languages and they clearly do not have any experiences with those different languages? There was also another question asking about the switching process, okay, the switching process of people with multiple personality and dissociative identity disorder. So stick around for Friday. I'm going to be answering that question. Thank you so much for being with me today in this video. If it was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with somebody who may be interested in this information. I'll see you on Friday. Bye-bye.